are again. I'm William C. Moyers, your host for a fresh season of Let's Talk, a new run of podcasts featuring experts on the topics from A to Z that matter to Hazel and Betty Ford and matter to you, our listeners and viewers. We have on the show experts to talk about addiction and treatment for it. We have insiders to share what it means to recover from a substance use disorder. We feature experts on prevention to explain how we as parents talk to our kids about alcohol and other drugs. Sometimes we feature scientists to delve into the latest research into what makes some people vulnerable to addictive substances. And we love to feature advocates sharing their war stories of getting down in the trenches to smash the stigma of addiction in their communities. And for today's podcast, we have an expert whose journey from addiction to recovery can actually be summed up by his initials, AZ. My friend and fellow traveler, Andrew Zimmern, who long before, Andrew, you were a quirky chef traveling the world to find and eat bizarre foods in front of the camera of your own television show, long before you built a culinary media empire, you were simply another hopeless soul living and nearly dying in an abandoned building in New York City. Welcome, Andrew Zimmern. Thanks for being here.
Oh, my pleasure, William. Thanks for having me.
So, Andrew, how did you get out of that abandoned building in New York City?
The further that I get from it, the more that I see it as being an inexplicable moment that really only involves the grace of power greater than my ability to describe it or calculate it. We talk about it in recovery as being our higher power. We know that the earth is not hurtling meaninglessly through space. To admit to that would be to not understand all the rest that both science and spirituality tells us is the case. But when you look back on, those crucial moments when you go from hopeless soul to hopeful citizen, what bridges that gap? For 20 years, parents, teachers, friends, colleagues, doctors, judges, policemen, attorneys, you name it, they came in every archetype, told me that I needed to make a change. And yet somehow, dying in a hotel room in New York City in January of 1992, something inside of me changed that today I can only describe as being God's grace. The entire year of 1991, essentially, I was homeless in New York City. That's where my disease had taken me. I was 29 years old. I was a user of people and a taker of things. I was a petty thief, stealing pocketbooks off the backs of restaurant chairs to support my lifestyle, which at that point was living in an abandoned building and drinking around the clock. The neighborhood where I've gone back since, and the neighborhood where this abandoned building was is now some of the most expensive real estate in Manhattan. I guess that's what happens when you stay sober long enough. But back then it was an abandoned building with cement casements in the windows. And the night that I was evicted from my apartment building in New York City, and was able to walk out of there with a army duffel bag filled with clothing, I went to the shot and beer bar that I would do my late night drinking in. And the guys there who were part of a bottle gang told me that, I should go talk to AJ, and they pointed this guy in the corner who I recognized from being around there. And I did. And he said that there was a space in this on the floor of this building that he and a couple other people were squatting. And, at that point, I just saw it as a place to rest my head for the night. And I went down there. I lived there for 10 months. I slept on a dirty pile of clothing. And every couple of days I went to the bodega around the corner and stole a bottle of Comet Cleanser to sprinkle in a circle around that pile of dirty clothing so that when I passed out every night, the rats and roaches wouldn't crawl all over me. That's where my disease took me. And I thought that was okay for 9 months. we pirated some electricity. There was no running water in the building. I didn't shower or bathe for the whole time that I lived there. It was a very, very, very low bottom that came at the end of a series of horrific moments in my life that had left me despairing and with nowhere else to go. And I decided at one moment, I had a quasi moment of mistaken clarity, I guess it is, where I felt, well, there are losers and winners in life. I'm a loser. And best to just end this all. I had no desire to live the way I was living, but I certainly wasn't willing to do anything to change it. And I stole some jewelry from my godmother and hawked it and got a couple $100 and went to a flop house hotel and handed it to the guy behind the counter and got my room, walked back across the street, got a couple of cases of Popov vodka. They had just switched over to plastic bottles. I'll never forget it, because when I went to reach over to grab the cases, the salesperson was like, "Do you need help with that?" And I was about to say yes, but I lifted it up and it was pretty light. And I kind of looked at him and he went, "Plastic bottles." That was new that year. I was shocked. Hauled that back to my room and just started, chugging vodka around the clock. Other people told me I was there somewhere around 4 days. I don't remember a lot of what happened other than coming to one morning and just not being dead, but also fantastically, for the first time since I was 7 or 8 years old, I didn't have that ace bandage of pressure around my chest. I didn't have the anxiety that I experienced during every waking moment of my life when I wasn't medicating myself. And for whatever reason, I did something that I had never done before in my whole life, which was ask another human being for help. I went to the hallway phone and threw some quarters in and called my friend, who came and collected me and tried to dry me out for a couple of days in his apartment. I didn't know that he was in contact with at the time what was called Hazelden, and he was, and he, with the help of people there, was arranging an intervention for me that I walked into 2 days later, and got a one-way plane ticket and was picked up at Carousel 14 by a friendly volunteer, and that was the evening of January 28th of 1992.
You ended up in Minnesota. You received treatment here. You stayed in Minnesota. How were those first years of recovery for you?
Oh, fantastic. Some of the best years of my life. The amount of progress that you make as a human being when you're really head, ass, and overcoat into recovery is that rocket ship into the fourth dimension. So many things changed so quickly. I'd been drinking and drugging alcoholically since I was 13. So the minute I put, metaphorically, the cork in the bottle, 80% of my consequences just evaporated. My thinking began to clear up. I was willing to take direction from other people, partially because I didn't have any choice, but partially because as I experimented with these, spiritual practices, some of them really started to work for me and pay off dividends. And so it was electric. Working the steps with a sponsor in a 12-step program, doing service, probably the most impactful thing on my life, and the thing that has probably stayed with me the longest, sort of the key to how I run my whole life, quite frankly. Those were all things that I developed during those first couple years. And it was the greatest gift of all, because it was so little pressure on me. I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. I didn't own businesses. I didn't, they told me, keep it simple in everything, get a 9-to-5 job that you really don't have to take home to the house with you. The little things that get you from point A to B to C to D to E, and eventually got me to a place where, after being sober for a couple of years, I was able to re-engage with other parts of my life that are still in existence today, that I'm able to navigate thanks to what I learned during those early years in recovery.
So I want to fast forward to today, essentially, in the few minutes that we have left, because you are an extraordinary fellow traveler in that you still have your feet on the ground. I mean, you have parlayed your passion for food, you have parlayed your recovery from a substance use disorder into the person, the successful person, the personality, the famous person that you are today. I mean, Andrew Zimmern.
I clean up well.
You clean up well, and you do add a beard in a nice way too, I must add, by the way.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure if it's Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top, if it's Mandy Patinkin's character Saul Berenson from Homeland, if it's like a young Gandalf the Grey from Lord of the Rings. We're really not sure where it's going. When it was shorter, it kind of was a homeless grifter look, but it's coming in nicely.
Well, and eventually, after people watch this Let's Talk podcast, everyone will be saying it's a beard that an Andrew Zimmern would wear.
Well, thank you.
So on that note, Andrew, and I've known you for 30 years, and I'm grateful for it. You are an extraordinary fellow traveler because in spite of all of your success, and you've had a massive success, renowned in your media, your culinary media empire, you have kept your feet on the ground. How do you do it all these years later, man?
I just keep listening to the first 5 or 6 things anybody ever told me once my head cleared enough where I could actually remember them. I'd love to tell you it was instantaneous, but when you actually do the math, I spent 5 or 6 days on the hospital unit at Ignatia up in Center City, and mostly because they were very worried about my detox. It was a little lengthier than average. I spent 28 days on the Shoemaker unit. And I learned a lot there. But I really think it was the transition period from primary care into living in the halfway house fellowship club that Hazel and Betty Ford operates in St. Paul, where I really remember, I can remember the clothes people were wearing when I heard people say things to me that were, just the smallest little cliches that we have in our recovering life. Keep it simple. Don't drink and go to meetings. Get a sponsor who has a sponsor who has a sponsor. Work the steps and keep working the steps. Immerse yourself in service work. And as long as you do those things, your chances for a happy and content life increased astronomically. Have I taken back my own will in certain aspects of my life? Sure. Every day I do that with myself, and I catch myself and I work my 10th step, and there's things that I do that help me to manage that today. A scary word for anyone in the first 20 years of sobriety. But, when you get past that point, you really learn that there's actually some art to the navigation of what your head is telling you and how to eliminate those thoughts and not be reactive to them, to not act on them. For a long time, I would have, thought, action. And recovery taught me the first 20 years to put a healthy space between what I think and then what I do. But I try to keep it really simple. I have friends who I sobered up with who don't go to meetings anymore. They seem content and happy. I judge no human being. That's not what my recovery looks like. I can't do it that way. I think the other cliche that I listen to a lot is some are sicker than others. And I've never put myself into the others category. I just carry with me a very firm belief that if I don't take my medicine on a daily basis, if I don't start my day with some form of prayer and meditation, if I don't carry thoughts of doing service work for others throughout my day, if I don't work the spiritual program of the steps of my 12-step program, I am a mess, right? And when I do those things, my days are pretty good. So I've just learned to do those things every day. I think of myself more as like a kind of a lab rat, actually, that just, I've learned that if I hit the right bottle, everything sort of works out. There's one of my favorite little, small little stories is the tale of Cherokee wisdom, which I talk about a lot, both as a parent, with people here in the workspace, in recovery, and I don't phrase it up necessarily in the traditional way, but the traditional story is short and really wonderful and probably sums up how I'm able to do what I do. And it's the story of a Cherokee elder who is talking to his son and explains to him that every morning when we wake up, two wolves start fighting within us. There's the good wolf that's helpful and kind and generous and other-centered and thoughtful and brave and all of those wonderful attributes that we want to be. And then there's the other wolf who's greedy and violent and avaricious and selfish and all of the things that we don't want to be. And the Cherokee elder asks his son, when those wolves fight each day, do you know which wolf wins? And the son looks at him and says, no, I don't, father. And his dad replies, the wolf that you feed. And so I've just kept feeding the wolf of my better nature, and things have worked out.
Last question. Things have worked out. And you're not content just to have them work out. You also are remarkable in how you give away what you have. Talk to me about the role that gratitude has played in your life and how important it is that you pass it on.
I should have been dead 20 times decades ago. I'm playing in extra time right now. The life that I have been given by putting one foot in front of the other and just walking the path is it's ridiculous. I have no right to complain about anything, despite the fact that just like every other human being on planet Earth, the same stuff happens to me, right? A good mutual friend of ours is always fond of saying, life is fired at you at point blank range. Kids get sick, parents die, you lose jobs, dogs run away, girlfriends dump you, you get fired, business deals don't work out. I mean, I all those things happen to me. I mean, none of us are immune to life. Life happens to all of us. But if you accept that life happens to all of us, and that the only thing, as some of our literature teaches us, that we can change is me and my attitudes, then you got to go to work on that. And the easiest way to work on my attitude is something that I learned really early on, actually, in primary treatment on the Shoemaker unit, which was to write down stuff you're grateful for. I still have my diary from primary treatment. And at one point, it looks like something that Jack Nicholson wrote in The Shining. Over and over, it says, I'm hopeless. I'm hopeless. I'm hopeless. And, my counselors and peers, convinced me that maybe I should, instead of writing that down, whether I believed it or not, maybe write down just one thing that I was actually grateful for. And that tiny little foundational element of a new way of thinking and doing actually changed the way that I think. My sponsor is very fond of reminding people all the time. It's one of my favorite things he's ever told me. You can't think your way into right acting, but you can act your way into right thinking. So there's no way to manufacture gratitude. But if you actually take an action and write down every day 3 things you're grateful for, the next thing you know, it's 5 years later and you're carrying an attitude of gratitude around with you. Combining that with the acknowledgement through a lot of inventory, sometimes twice a year, always once a year, I've been able to look and see that service work, doing things for other people, is the greatest medicine for, getting out of my own head and keeping myself right-sized and centered than any other tool that I know of. And so I'm always reminded of the 10th step in our literature. I always mess this up because I'm a third edition big book guy, so it's the bottom of page 84, but it's talking about the 10th step, where it actually says, if you're thinking these 4 things, you got to take these 4 actions, and the last action is to do something for another human being, because love and tolerance of others is our code. And if you do things for other people, understanding that love and tolerance of others is our code, that's practicing empathy. Anyone will tell you, Brene Brown famously, empathy is the key to happiness. It doesn't mean you're going to get what you want. It doesn't mean that, things are showered upon you. But I at one point in my life suffered from a lot of different problems that now are meaningless to me, simply because I don't think about them anymore. I don't have to have X or Y or Z to be happy. I know that I can be happy just based on what I do for myself and what my attitude is internally. And that's the greatest gift of all. That truly is that freedom from bondage that that story in the big book famously tells.
What a great gift you are, Andrew Zimmern, not only to Hazel and Betty Ford, but to the recovery community and for people who need to go from hopelessness to hope. Andrew Zimmern, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, my friend. See you later.
Please join us for another edition of Let's Talk, and make sure to tell your family and friends, your colleagues and fellow travelers to check out our podcast too. On behalf of our executive producer, Lisa Stangl, and the crew of Blue Moon Productions, we want to remind you that together we are building a healthier, wholesome, and happier tomorrow, one day and one life at a time. Take good care.